Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Roland Frazier, and Rick Cesari. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of products over the past 27 years. So if you're a company that has software, product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you could email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Brian Smith. Brian founded UGG, an Australian brand that has gone on to become a multi-billion-dollar global icon. And since then, Brian has become one of the most sought-after speakers and business leaders in the country, in addition to publishing books and publications throughout the media. He presents on topics such as team building, company culture, growth challenges, all through the lens of his vast experience, and also the school of hard knocks that he experienced while growing UGG. He combines that with his spiritual approach towards creating the future of business today. And I'm very pleased to welcome here today Brian Smith. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks, Rich. That's one of the best introductions I've ever had.
Awesome. Success, but well earned, well deserved, and despite all of that you've created, started out very humble, right? I mean, you started out in Australia. You noticed something. You noticed that with regard to innovation, California was the source of many of the big things that became trends, became hits. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, I was an accountant in Australia. It took 10 years for me to graduate, and I quit the same day I graduated because I hated accounting. But I discovered yoga back then, and I was meditating one morning, and a couple of weeks after I quit, because I knew I needed to get some sort of job, and I thought, all the best trends are coming out of California, and Levi jeans and waterbeds and all the surf brands and everything. And I thought, I don't want to be an accountant or an employee. I want to start my own business. So I decided to go to Los Angeles and look for the next big thing that was brewing in California, and I was going to get on it early and bring it back to Australia. And so within like a couple of weeks, I arrived in LA, and I got a little house in Santa Monica, and I brought my surfboard so I could go surf Malibu, because that had been one of my dreams all my life. And it's funny too, because picking California, it wasn't that big a stretch, right? It's like if you're going to move from the awesome surf of Australia to anywhere, it's either Hawaii or California. So that's right.
It wasn't a hardship moving to California.
No. California had always intrigued me, but I'd never ever thought I'd live in America, which ended up what happened. But I arrived and just went to Malibu and spent the first month surfing, and I was scanning newspapers and, different businesses that were around to see if any would be, good for Australia. And I spent nothing in the first month. And then, 3 months later, I'm still looking. And then one day in about October, and this is 40 years ago, so it's, a lot of people don't think UGG's been around that long, but it took a long time. And I was up at Malibu, and the surf had got really cold, and the wind was chilly. It was, the storms were coming in. And I remember finishing up a surf, and I pulled on my sheepskin boots that I'd brought from Australia. And I just got covered in goosebumps. And I thought, oh my God, there are no sheepskin boots in America. And 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of sheepskin footwear. And so I looked at my buddy Doug, who I was with, and said, hey, man, we got to go to business. We got to be instant millionaires. And, we've all had those thoughts. But unfortunately, entrepreneurship and business building doesn't work for instant millionairism, you know?
Right.
And so we got back home and we called up a couple of different sheepskin boot manufacturers in Australia and finally got one to let us be his distributor. So we ordered 6 pairs of boots, and when they arrived, Doug was going to be the salesman, so he went out and spent a week traveling around Southern California to every shoe store, and came back a week later and no orders. And he said, Brian, they say we're crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And at surface value, that seemed like a logical thing, but Australia's climate's identical to California, so it wasn't true. And so we started thinking laterally. When an entrepreneur hits a wall, you have to sort of think laterally.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, how come everyone up at Malibu thinks this is the best idea in the world? And it just struck us that, oh my God, all those guys who have been down to Australia on their surf trips had bought 4 or 5 pairs of boots back for their buddies because it was such a big deal down there. And so everyone in the surf community had a pretty good understanding of UGG, especially in California. And so Doug and I just decided, okay, let's go after the surf shops. And so this time I went on the road, and I remember driving into the first shop, Con Surfboards in Santa Monica, and I opened up my little bag of samples, and he goes, "Oh, UGG boots, man, what are you doing with those?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking of going into business importing them." "Oh my God, you're going to make a fortune. Those things are the best. I've got a pair," and then I went to the next surf shop, and oh my God, that's a great idea. All my friends have got them. And so, I went all the way down from Malibu, all the way down to the Mexican border, and Doug was doing the Inland Valley area and getting the same reaction. And so we met a week later in my house in Santa Monica, and just said, oh my God, this is going to be so big. And so it didn't occur to us that neither of us had asked for an order because we didn't have any inventory. So, there's no point. But now we needed inventory. So a friend of my roommate was looking to invest in a business, and we raised 20 grand, which was about, in today's money, about 80,000. And we sent 15 down to Australia and ordered 500 pairs of boots. And they finally arrived at, the end of November, and we sort of stacked them all in my 3rd bedroom in the house at Santa Monica. And we loaded up our vans and went back on the road, this time with order pads, and I went back to Con Surfboards in Santa Monica, and he saw me come in with this huge bag of boots and said, "Oh, well done, Brian," And I said, "Okay, how many do you want?" And he goes, "Oh, we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and flip-flops, that they're way too expensive for us. You should go to the shoe stores." And that was my first disillusionment. You're like, oh, shit, Mm-hmm. And the next store was, "Oh, well done, Brian, but we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and bikinis and, surf trunks." And bottom line is, we finished our road trip. I went to every one of the same surf shops, and Doug did also. And we got back into our little office in Santa Monica and tallied up the orders. And it was exactly 28 pairs. So much for us being
resistance was. What do you think the resistance was at that point among the surf shop?
Well, they thought, like, I didn't do any sort of canvassing of the market beforehand, which I now learned is something that you have to do. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line was that Americans didn't understand sheepskin. Australians know, they're born with the knowledge that you can't rip it. It's really rugged. You can wash it. You can wear them with wet feet and they still insulate, But Americans, oh, it's hot, it's delicate, we can't get them wet, we have mud where we are, So nobody could take them seriously as a really, really cool, form of footwear. But eventually we shipped the 28 pairs out, and that, that hitting that incredible wall of no interest was something that I was very aware of, and I carried that thought forward in years to come. And I watched other businesses starting, and even other businesses that I started, and I came up with the theme that you can't give birth to adults, And I wrote a book. I'm going to hold it up here. It's called The Birth of a Brand. And if anyone's interested, you should, it's a roadmap for entrepreneurs, right? Pretty much on what not to do.
Entrepreneurs need that roadmap, that's for sure.
They absolutely do. But the theme of not giving birth to adults is that every entrepreneur who starts a business thinks, oh my God, it's going to be the best thing in the world. I'm going to make this into $1 million business. And you launch it and you get almost no traction, and it just lies there and it lies there. And you got to keep feeding it and, nurturing it, and eventually it'll start to toddle, just like a toddler. And the first magazines are writing articles about you, and then other first true believers are taking it out, telling their friends, and that's a really cool phase. But it goes into the youth phase where you've got consistent orders, production's working, accounting and billing is working, and the roads, all the salesmen are working, and that you can run a $20-30 million business in that phase. But if it's a really, really great product or service, you're going to hit the teenage years. And just like we all wanted to be at every party in town on a Saturday night as teenagers, in business, you want to be in every big box retailer, and you want to be every major trade show. And it's really, really dangerous. You just kill your business by growing so fast that you can't keep the cash flow going. And I went close to that a couple of times. But then eventually it becomes a mature company.
And like a typical teenager, that you can't tell them anything. You can't tell them that you know better. Right. They know best. No, we have to be in that trade show. We have to go to that event.
That's so true.
Yeah. So, and then you said, and eventually then the brand matures and becomes more.
Yeah, it took several years. I remember advertising those first few years with a perfect model sitting on the perfect rock on the beach, and the UGG boots were like way up in the main part of the photo. And I did that for 3 years and got no traction whatsoever. The sales went from 5,000, next year 10, next year 20, and it should have been way, way more than that. And I was about to give up the business because I just thought, it's too hard. But this fourth year, I decided to, have a beer with one of my surf shop owners. I was explaining this problem about, nobody understanding UGG boots. And he says, "Oh, shut up, Brian." And he calls out to these guys in the back of the room, back of the store. And these 12, 13-year-old kids came out, and he says, "Hey, what do you guys think of UGG boots?" And every one of them just went, "Oh, those Uggs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf." And like instantly I realized I'm sending the wrong message to my target market. And I was embarrassed by my ads, really. And so laterally thinking again, I called up a buddy who was running a youth surf team up in Orange County. I said, "Hey, Pete, any of these guys going to turn pro soon? Because I really would, I can't afford big names." But anyway, he gave me Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson, and I just went to surfing with him, and I took my own little camera and did shots walking to and back from, Black's Beach and Trestles. These are two iconic mile-long walks to the beach where there's always fantastic surf. And I ran ads just showing them walking to the beach, and you could hardly see the product. The feet were so small, and the sales went to $220,000. And why? Because I finally got authentic, and it wasn't about the boots. They didn't give a damn about what the boots looked like in the ad. They just would die to be walking down those roads with Mike and Ted. And I really tuned into the sort of feeling and the emotion that goes with the product. And that was the big learning lesson for me in marketing and advertising. And that was the beginning, after 5 years, that was the beginning of the UGG business as a business.
Right. You found the brand identity that spoke to your target audience, and it communicated the message, and sales was starting to move along. So I guess that's where it really took traction.
Yeah, it took 5 years to really get started. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So just steering a little bit towards IP. So I mean, UGG is a multi-billion-dollar brand, and
Yes.
so clearly at the present moment, UGG has extremely valuable IP. But what
Yes.
role did it play during the growth of the company?
Well, it was vital that the best thing I ever did was register the trademark right when I began. And there was an anomaly in Australia. UGG had been around for years, 20, 30 years, but nobody ever registered it down there. And the law in Australia is the first guy in with the $10 and a form, registers the name. But in America and the rest of the world, if you can establish first use and continual use, then you own the trademark, even if you didn't even file for it 20 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So me registering the UGG brand was key, but I didn't realize it at the time. And as things went on, there were tons of knockoffs, lots of people coming in from Australia going, we can say UGG because we don't need to register it. And I had spent a lot of time in the early days fighting for that brand. And I want to be clear here that your brand is not the trademark registration, right? Your brand is not your logo, right? Your brand is not the product. The brand is what customers think about your product and brand. And that took several years to develop. And so even though I had to bat off these small attackers in the beginning, as the brand got bigger, the credibility for UGG really showed itself. Like, I remember after about the fourth, fifth year, the year that it took off, all these other brands came into the market the next year, and they did quite a bit of sales. But the interesting thing is that they got, like the kids, let me back up. The moms didn't know where to buy them, right? But all the kids are saying, "Oh, mom, all the cool kids at school have got UGG boots," right? So the mums started walking the malls, going to all these, places that I didn't deal with, and they bought all these knockoffs, and they gave them to their children at Christmas, and the kids refused to wear them because the whole fake UGG thing had already started, and they didn't want to be at school with a pair of fake UGG boots, right? So that's when I started to realize, that was 5 years in, where I started to realize the power of the brand, because these mums are coming to us saying, "Oh, we bought these other ones. Can we swap them over?" And we're going, "No, you got to go to the stores and buy the real ones." And that's what the brand means. It's what your customers think of your brand. And if your customers refuse to buy the knockoffs because your brand is really powerful, then you really have something in your business.
Yes, exactly. And so that's what the brand is. And the trademark then helps you to keep that exclusive.
Yes.
It helps to stop other people from trying to copy your brand.
That's right.
Yeah.
And would you believe that brand challenge has gone on for 40 years? In fact, the Supreme Court in the US last October made their final ruling that my UGG brand stands against any challenges from Australia. So it goes, just because you have the trademark, doesn't mean you're home easy. You got to defend it. And since I sold the company UGG, and then the trademark went with it, Deckers Corporation has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars over the last 20 years just defending it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you have something valuable, people try to edge in on it. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm gonna ask you a few questions about some of your business lessons, and I'm just gonna fire off a few things that I know that that you like to talk about. So what did your experience running UGGs teach you about customer service?
Wow, the let's fast forward about 10, 12 years. We're doing several $1 million in business. And one of my financial partner died, and my supplier was really reluctant to send me any product because he had just had 3 or 4 years of really good payments. And I knew he remembered back to when I was running the business solely, and he never knew when the money was coming. And I didn't know when I was going to send it. I always paid him, but he started to balk. And I was sending all these orders, 10,000 pairs, 5,000 pairs, another 10,000 pairs. I was sending all the orders down to him, and I couldn't get a firm commitment on when he was going to deliver. And that ran its course. That started in February when my partner died, and all the way through July, I didn't get any feedback on when my product was coming in, and we were having just a killer sales season. And it turned out that by July, I had to start looking for other manufacturers. Had a lot of visits with, especially one tannery down in Australia, who said that they were going to, back me, but then it never really happened. And then it got to this trade show in September, which kicks off the season. And I found when we set up, our booth, that there was another sheepskin booth, that was owned by a windsurfing company. And I was thinking, why would they even be in the show? But when I went across and I looked at all the product, there was all my product, the new colors, the charcoal and the black, and all my regular colors. And my supplier had found a different distributor and never told me. And so, we ended up that show writing a huge number of orders, and I realized I'm not going to get any product. And finally, my tannery contact came through and said, "God damn, Brian, I'll supply you." And he cranked up 4 or 5 manufacturers, and he started sending 5,000 pairs a week to me, and I was just dribbling them out to all of my sales accounts. And at the end of the season, in December, we'd shipped about $1.5 million, but we threw away another $1 million worth of orders because we just started so late. And it turns out that how can I put this? Between Christmas and New Year, my customs broker screwed up and shipped 2,000 pairs of boots to this, knockoff, and the company that knocked it off used the name Thugs, because their name was Thunderwear. Mm-hmm. And they used Thugs as their brand, and they shipped 4,000 pairs of Thugs to me. So when I went up and swapped them around, I noticed that their warehouse, which was bigger than ours, was floor to ceiling full of sheepskin boots, with the Thugs brands on them. And I realized then that, oh my God, we couldn't keep 5,000 pairs every Friday in the warehouse for 24 hours, and their warehouse was full. And that's when I realized that my customers, who I had a relationship with all across the country, because I'd flown so many miles, visiting with them, they refused to buy the Thugs. And, they threw away $2 million worth of orders at retail. And that's when I realized how powerful the brand had become, where all of my customers realized that my manufacturer had done an end run, and they refused to buy them. So that was a long story to sort of answer your question, but when you have customer loyalty like that, it's unbelievable. And even though today we're in websites and clicks and Amazon and instant purchasing, if you are a supplier in this market, you've got to be able to reach through the internet and make a personal connection with all of your customers. And I've seen other companies do it where they're very, very successful in keeping, a real constant, contact with all of their retailers.
Yeah, I got it. And so then I think the point is that it really taught you the value of what great customer service, great customer relationships can provide. Is that you can have a situation where you can't keep product on the shelf because
it was my lifeline that got me through that season. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you spent 5 years really getting traction with Uggs, and there were times where you were ready to give up. And so kind of what got you through that? Like what got you through the moments where it just really wasn't, you weren't instant millionaires. You weren't even, millionaires after a few years.
We were grinding after 5 years. The fifth and sixth year was when we started to get enough predictable sales where we could start bringing on good staff and doing proper marketing campaigns and stuff like that. But there's a couple of things. One is I learned through, there was a period where I lost control of my company when I brought different investors in. And I was just a full-time salesman on the road at that point. And, there was a point where I didn't think these new guys were going to issue my stock and everything like that. But I eventually survived that. And I came up with the philosophy, which again is in my book. My book's full of philosophy, from all of the lessons that I learned from all these disasters. But the best one was that your most disappointing disappointments will nearly always become your greatest blessings, right? And I learned this from just being in business and taking these hard knocks. But when I'm on stage, I talk to hundreds and sometimes thousands of people in the stage. And I always ask the question, you raise your hand if something happened in the last 12 months in your personal or business life where at the time you thought it was the greatest disaster. And now you look back and think, oh my God, thank God that happened, because where I am now is so much better than where I would have been if I had carried on down that path. So your most disappointing disappointments will always become your greatest blessings.
Absolutely. That's a great lesson. And and spirituality. I know you're spiritual and you bring that to
very
business.
Much
so what has spirituality taught you about business? Or how to approach business?
In my talks and all through the book, I talk about goosebumps. All the times I got goosebumps. And after years of sort of noticing this, I realized that, this is my personal philosophy, that God isn't out the end of the universe somewhere way out there, right? I've just come to believe that there's a fragment of God or a spirit or whatever you want to call it inside every one of us. And it has a plan for us in our life. And I've found that every time that I've got the goosebumps now, that I try and analyze what just happened. And it's nearly always, I'll get this flash of inspiration for a new direction or a new solution out of an issue that I'm dealing with. And it's almost infallible that those goosebumps are the sort of, it's my internal way of telling me, okay, Brian, you're on the right track. And the only way I can get to us is through this electrochemical thing we're walking around in,
Right.
And so that's become very, very much my philosophy. So if any of your listeners get goosebumps, I just urge you to stop for a second and think, what did I just think? And I'll bet you it'll be something momentous.
So the goosebumps are like an antenna that tell you what to pay attention to.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
I love it. Well, Brian, this is amazing. If people want to learn more about you, get in contact with you, how do they go about doing so?
Sure. Just go to my website. It's uggfounder.com, uggfounder.com. And all my contact information is at the end of the website there. And, my business now is, because I sold the company in the late 90s, and that's when it tracked off into the billions because of this connection I made with Oprah right as I was selling the company. And she and her publicity machine dragged us off into the millions and the hundreds of millions and eventually the billions. There's a lot of resources in my website, but my day-to-day fun job right now is public speaking. I love traveling the world. I mean, I go all over the world talking from the stage about various parts of the book. A lot of the stuff we've talked about today, but it goes much more in depth. And the book is even way, way more in depth than that. I'll hold it up one more time again. It's called The Birth of a Brand. And you can get that on Amazon. And if any of your listeners are looking for a really good speaker, for sure, contact me through the website. And I'd love to sort of see if we can make it happen.
Yeah, I saw you speak a few weeks ago, and it was awesome. And I took pages and pages of notes, and I'm really thrilled that you took the time to be on my podcast to join me on this program here. So
it's my pleasure. Yeah.
So thanks so much, Brian, and hopefully I'll get to see you speaking at another event real soon.
I hope so. Yeah, and good luck to all you entrepreneurs out there. Just remember, you can't give birth to adults.
I love it. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.